Greetings, chess players, and welcome to another episode of Torres with some help from my friends. The chess show where I present a video of my friends teaching their favorite chess lessons. Over the years, I've been lucky to have acquired a large number of friends through chess. In life, friends can help us by bringing new ideas to the table and adding diversity to our viewpoints. In chess, my chess friends have enriched me with games and motifs that I would have surely missed without knowing them. So now it is my pleasure to pass my friends' knowledge on to you in this show called Torres with some help from my friends. In this episode, FIDE Master James Eade looks at the 1986 correspondence game between Heinz, Engl, and James Eade contained in a book he authored entitled Remember the McCutcheon. During the lesson, Jim shares an innovative solution for Black's infamous bad bishop in the French defense, Mccutcheon Variation. His idea involves a well-timed f5 and e5 pawn push that not only creates a pathway for Black's bishop to enter the game, but also undermines White's king's safety. Beyond the beauty of this theoretical novelty, Jim's game is a masterwork, and this lesson on it is a master class in the concepts of space and force in chess.
Now, I'm going to call out moves to Chris, and Chris is going to play them on the board that you can see. And I wanted to talk about this game in particular. It's one of my favorite games because I played it. And it was in a match in that time, the Soviet Union was still a thing, and East Germany and Germany were still separate. So I was able to play a team match, USA versus East Germany. Now, we could not travel there. This is a long time ago, remember. We could not go to East Germany. I could not meet this person in person. But we could play a game of chess. And we sent postcards. Can you imagine? We sent postcards to one another all the time in delivery, then the time that he could get to think, then make his move, all the time in delivery tonight. So this game went on and on and on. But the first game, he was white. His name was Engl, and he played e4. Now, think about the geometry of chess. What has that done? E2 to e4, you have one square is occupied in the center and one square is attacked. This is a very good move. Also, it opens up a line for the bishop and a line for the queen. So it's helping in the element of time. It's done nothing about force, but space and time, good things to control. So what did I play? I played e6. Amazing. I don't know if you can see them, e4, e6. Now, this is not quite as good as e4, because e6 attacks one center square, but it does not occupy one. It opens up a line for the bishop and a line for the queen, so that's very good. So e6
is good move. Sorry.
Is good move.
And,
sorry. And
why is it called the French defense?
Well, back in the day, long time ago, before I was born, England and France played a telegraph match. And English team opened with e4, and the French team opened with e6. And so ever since, it's been called the French defense. Now, this is the kind of thing, our opening naming conventions are a little bit strange. Sometimes they catch on for no reason at all, apparently. Sometimes they're named after a player or a tournament that it was played in, or a country that it was played in. You'll think of the Sicilian, you think of the Scotch, you'll think of different names. The naming conventions, don't get fixated on them because they're just pretty much made up as we went along. But the moves, e4, e6 are good. So he would play typically d4. d4 is the very good move. Why? Why is d4 a good move? Well, it occupies the center square, it attacks the center square. It opens a line for the bishop and a little bit of the file for the queen. So it helps in time, it helps in space. Excellent move. To have the pawns abreast like this, very powerful in the center. So there's nothing you can say it's bad about the move, right? Wrong. You can say something good and bad about every move in chess except for checkmate. What is the downfall of moving your pawn to queen 4? It can no longer protect e3 or c3 And it cannot move backwards, so d3 is in its history. It's in its rear view mirror. It cannot see d3. So I played the typical response in the French. e6 is preparatory for d5. The advanced d5 puts the question to the pawn on e4. It occupies the center square and attacks another one. I call it the honoriest defense in chess, because right away, white says, I want e4, and right away, black says, you can't have it. So we're fighting right off the bat in the French. So there are many, many moves that you can be played here, but my opponent from East Germany played the typical one, the most common, knight c3. Now, why knight c3? Because it protects the pawn on e4. It develops a piece. Moving a piece off the back rank into the game is called development. We want to develop our pieces, minimum number of pawn moves, and move the maximum number of pieces off the back rank, and we will complete our development. If we complete our development before our opponent completes theirs, we will have the advantage of time. Not force, not material, but time. All of these, when you throw them in together, if you're equal in all other things and have an advantage in time, you will win the game. Or you will have an advantage. So I played what was called the classical response, was knight f6. Because knight f6 does the same thing. It attacks the e4 square that's just been defended. So it's defended once, it's attacked twice. So I'm once again putting pressure on the white position. Now, you can say, okay, white's got to do something about that. Now, there's a couple of things he can do. The most common, which is what he played, is bishop g5. Bishop g5, what does that do? This comes up in another thing that we have not mentioned yet, tactics. One of the tactics in chess that's most common is called the pin. And the pin is when you have a piece that if it moves, it would expose a greater piece, a piece of greater value to capture. Now, if you pin a piece to the king, it's nailed down tight. If you pin a piece to the queen, it can still move, but you would have to be willing to sacrifice your queen. And in terms of units of force, the queen is worth 9. That's a lot of sacrificing if you're going to sacrifice your queen. You better have a darn good reason for doing that. So bishop g5 is very common. Now, the most common response, the classical variation, is bishop e7. You can see that. It breaks the pin. I played my favorite, the McCutcheon variation. And it was named after a person. So no rhyme or reason. Just happened to be that person played that move and got the variation named after him. And it pins the knight to the king. So this knight is firmly pinned down. I mean, it is nailed down. It cannot move. It is illegal for it to move. This knight can move. But once again, this square, which white wanted right from the beginning, is attacked by the pawn, attacked by the knight, although it's pinned, and is defended by one piece, which has now been firmly pinned to the king. Cannot move. So this pawn is again subject to capture. So what does white do in this case? Well, this is the most common and most logical move, is to play e5. Why? Well, e5 gets you more space. You want space. e5 is the first pawn to advance into enemy territory. It has crossed the neutral zone, the boundary between two sides of the board. And it is advanced into enemy territory. And it is attacking the knight that is pinned to the queen. And it looks like the knight might be lost. Do not fret, because when there's an attack, there is a counterattack. There can be a counterattack. And I played h6. Forgive me for my clumsiness, but I've dropped something. All right. And because he's attacking my knight, but I can attack his bishop. So I'd rather have his bishop than he would have my knight. So he's got to do something about that. What does he do? There's very different variations here, but one of them he played was bishop to e3. Now, in the book that I wrote about this, called Remember the McCutcheon, is that this was, I confessed at the time, the thorniest move for me. It was the least the one I least preferred my opponent to play. The most common is bishop d2. I love playing against that. This one always kind of gave me a little bit of a fit. So I didn't like, but he played it, so I had to play against it. So I moved my knight. I couldn't give my knight up worth 3 for a pawn worth 1. So I moved my knight to attack his knight. And the bishop is attacking it. So now I'm putting some pressure on his position, which is really why the more common move is bishop d2. Because now this looks like a tough nut to crack. What are you going to do? Well, what about this move? This move seems to be very diabolical because he's going to come in, capture my g7 pawn, threaten my rook, expose my king, and all the dark squares around the king would become soft and easily in jeopardy of being penetrated by enemy forces. So they would become defenseless, especially if this bishop is gone, capturing this knight. So it's a lot of complicated things going on here. But one of the best ways for white to play is here. Put the question to the bishop. Are you going to take the knight? You're going to retreat. You're going to go away? Where are you going to go? So typically what people do is take the knight. That's what happened in this game. Take the knight.
Uh-oh.
Recapture.
I missed a move.
Uh-oh.
Jim, after 7 queen g4, what happened?
g6. I'm sorry, I missed the move. g6. That was my fault entirely. He then played a3.
Got it.
So I played h6 to chase away the bishop, and then he played queen g4, and then I played g6 in response. Pardon me, Chris. Thank you for catching that. Now, the position has changed a little bit. The reason is you've got to defend that g7 pawn. One way is to do this. That's most people's preferred way.
Oh.
I'm a little bit ornery, though. I played g6, which is, if you look up in the textbooks at the time, they kind of gave it a little bit of a dubious remark because it weakens the pawn structure, weakens the king's dark squares around the king, letting them become defenseless to penetration by the enemy pieces. So what's the big deal? What's the difference? Well, I didn't want to move my king. I wanted to preserve the option of getting the king to the other side of the board, running away, as I like to call it. So g6, I said, you got king side attack, show me. I didn't think it was worth that much. Now, most white players thought, I've got an overwhelming position here, and this is why this variation became popular for a while. And so what they would want to do is pile up on that g6 square because I've just made an attack option, an object of attack. So bishop to d3 shoots through the knight towards... Did I do it again?
Jim, can we pause for one?
Did I do it again?
Yeah, can I?
Yeah.
So we've got e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, 4 bishop g5, 4 bishop b4, 5 e5, h6, 6 bishop e3, knight e4, 7 queen g4, and then g6, 8 a3, and then bishop takes c3, and then bx c3 for move 9.
Yep. Oh, good catch. Okay. Because I did take this pawn.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Going from my book to the board and back is confusing me.
It's okay. Yeah.
And I am easily confused.
No worries.
So thank you for backing me up there. So, all right. So I take the pawn. Then he plays bishop to d3. Now, this pawn is now looking to be taken because the king would be so exposed. Bishop takes pawn, pawn takes, queen takes. The king is in check, and where can it go? And I've got no pieces. All these pieces are just undeveloped. They're not going to help the king. So it's very dicey right now. I ignore it. I play here. I say fine. Because I can always bring the knight back. If the king has to run away to d7, I can block any checks with knight e7. I'm not worried. He can't take that pawn. If he does, I'll be happy. So he plays h4, which is a very good move because it threatens to attack the pawn again by advancing. So now I'm starting to sweat, except I'm not, because I've looked at this before and I know I'm prepared. I know what's going to happen. So I just play Queen E7. Now all of these bishop takes kind of lines, they all go out the window because my queen is part of the defense. So now you look before and the queen side was undeveloped. Now two pieces are developed. All I have to do is get the bishop out, and then I can castle queen side, and all this king side scariness goes away. I'm not afraid. So this is a very good defensive move. But white continues normally, h5, provoking. I can't let him just take it. So I have to, he provokes me to play g5. I didn't want to play g5, but you know, you do what you have to do sometimes in chess. He plays knight h3. Might be a little strange because we see that knights on the side of the board tend to be less powerful. Well, it does intend very directly to come back into play towards the center. So this is just a move that it doesn't want to go to this natural square here because it has some, white has something up in his mind that he wants to play. He's preparing it with the knight h3. So I just go about my business. I'm going to try to run away as fast as I can. Bishop to d7. Now he breaks up my king side. There's no question about it. My king side is now broken up. So am I all broken up because of it? No. I know what I'm doing. I played this before. I'm not upset. I'm confident. What is white going to do? He plays bishop to f2. Might be surprising because I just took a pawn. He's a pawn down now. Well, it's very temporary. There's no way I can defend this pawn. He's going to take it back. And what he's going to do is if I castle, play this little mean bishop to h4, pinning my queen to the rook. So I can't castle, which is what I want to do. So part of chess is knowing what your opponent wants to do and preventing them from doing it as you go about your business and carry out what you want to do. And this is the dance that we play. Two chess players, two chess masters will be dancing when they're on the chessboard. And one of them is trying to assert his or her will on the other. Now, I know that he's going to do that. But if I play here, queen to f8, which looks like I'm going backwards, but I'm not. I'm preparing to go forward. And more importantly, I'm preparing to castle queenside. Because if I castle queenside, well, his kingside attack, well, big deal. So he does take my pawn, which was inevitable. I wasn't worried about that. But now material balance has been restored. So our units of force are once again equal. But with a big sigh of relief, I castle. Chris, just are you being able to play along so they can see this?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So then I'll desist from playing here because it's taking my attention away from the moves and what I wanted to say. So after I castled, he does play bishop to h4. Now that's attacking my rook, right? I can't give up my rook worth 5 for a bishop worth 3, 3 1/4. So I play rook to e8. Okay, so it looks like I'm just getting out of the way. But I'm actually not. I'm preparing something that I think my opponent did not consider at all. You see, he plays knight f2. Now, that's a good move. It circles back. It circles back. I'll just do this so that I can return my attention. Now, it circles back to the center. That's what he wanted. He's got his bishop out, queen out, bishop out, knight out. He's almost fully developed. He's got a castle, though. I've already castled. All of my major pieces are connected. Rook, queen, rook. They're connected. They're working together. What's the downside of black position? Okay, I heard someone say it. It's this pawn chain, f7, e6, d5. Where does the bishop go? The bishop wants to be outside the pawn chain, but it's behind it. So I have what is classically known as the bad bishop in the French defense. Everybody who plays the French defense knows about the bad bishop, and how you solve the problem of the bad bishop is what makes you a good French player or a bad French player. So if you don't know how to solve the problem of the bad bishop, don't play the French defense. There's many other defenses you can play. But if you can be okay with having a bad bishop, for everything else you get. Like, for example, who's got e4 now? He doesn't. And from his first move, he wanted e4. I didn't let him have it. That's kind of the ornery chess player I used to be. So, whatever you want, you can't have. So NF2. Now, this is the move I think he did not think of. I played F5. What's the big deal? Well, now I have a sledge hold hammer over the E4 square. D5 pawn, F5 pawn, and the knight. So the knight can come back here and just any time he would capture, I would then have a protected passed pawn, which if we get into an ending, usually can be a winning advantage. So he doesn't want that. So he takes it en passant. And Chris, I'm assuming everyone knows what en passant is?
Yes.
Or should I explain?
Yeah,
okay.
Everybody should.
All right. So, yeah. He captures en passant in passing. And I say, gosh, what should I do now? Well, I had all of this prepared. Now, I want to say that this position had been achieved once before in chess history. It was in the Netherlands championship between two grandmasters, Cypers and Rie. Hans Rie is quite well known to the Western world. And Hans Rie played a different way. And Hans Rie lost the game. And so literature that I would get every few months from Yugoslavia would always say this is a bad position because Hans Rie lost this game. But I came up with the F5 move and followed it up with this move, which I'm quite certain no one had ever played before, F5, E5. No one had ever played this before. It's what we call a theoretical novelty. It's never been in print, published, or played in a game, at least maybe a casual game, but never in a serious competition. And all of a sudden, White's position starts to break up. And guess what? My bishop's in the game. This bad bishop is now looking pretty good. So I loved this whole idea. F5, E5, what do you do? Well, your king's still on this E file, and this rook that you're just getting out of the way of the bishop, you moved it to rook E8. No, now it's playing a big factor. This rook is attacking this king indirectly through this pawn, but he hasn't castled. He hasn't gotten his king to safety. King safety is another element of chess I neglected to mention. Space, time, material, king safety is right up there. You must preserve the safety of your king. That is of the utmost priority. There is no other element that can override that unless you're going to deliver checkmate to your opponent. If your king is unsafe and his is less safe, his or hers is about to be mated, then you can have a scary king position, an undefended king, if you're getting in first. But it's only in those types of things that you allow your king to be attacked. Only if you have something up your sleeve. And chess players want to have something up their sleeve. So he's pretty much forced to take it. Capture, capture. And then rook takes. So now the king is in check. The poor king, where can he go? He didn't get the castle, not in time. Okay, I've given up an advanced pawn here. I'm down a pawn, and it's advanced. It's deep in my territory, and it's protected. This is a scary pawn. But I am after bigger fish. So he must get out of the way, and he moves the king to F1. Now, this is the climax of the game, in my opinion, because this is beyond my analysis at this point. I'm on my own. I'm thinking. I can't figure out what's the next best move. And then I hit on this, D4. Why is D4 a good move? Yes, it protects the knight on C3, but that's meaningless. It has no meaning in the game. What it can do is it opens up a square for the knight to get back into the game, to attack the queen and to threaten knight to E3 check. So this was not an easy move to come up with, because you had to see, well, my knight on C3 is going nowhere. How can I redirect it? And that's how I got into move the pawn. Get the pawn out of the way. Sometimes we have what we call clearing sacrifices, and we just get material out of the way so bigger forces can come in behind it. So the knight the pawn moves to get out of the knight's way. The knight is a more powerful piece. So this is the point behind d4. So he plays knight g4. He says, well, I'll attack your rook then. This is scary, isn't it? I'm attacking your rook with my knight. You're going to have to move it, don't you? No, because I attacked your queen. I don't care. Take my rook. I'll take your queen. How does that sound? Well, the queen has to retreat. There are very few safe squares for the queen now, so the queen goes to one of them. Queen goes to f3. And then this poor bishop that was locked behind that pawn chain takes the knight. Knight's causing me a little bit of grief, so the bishop takes it. Queen takes it, and the king moves. Now look at his king, wide open to attack. Look at my king. At a glance, you're walking by. You basically, when you walk by a board, first thing you do is count the pawns, because you can pretty much see the pieces, but you have to count the pawns. I do, anyways. And so you count the pawns, and he's a pawn up. Okay, that's great. Except, hey, look at that king. Look at that king, unsafe. Look at that king, safe. This is the critical factor in the game, the safety of the king's safety. So, after, he takes king b3. He plays back here because he knows that I'm going to play rook to g8 anyway. So he plays the queen away from the attack, but I play it anyways. Oops. So the rook is now attacking deep into the king's territory. This rook is attacking deep into the king's territory. This knight is ready to spring into action. So, is it enough to checkmate? Probably not. I got to get some other piece into the game somehow, some way. So, what does he do? He says, oh, that rook is attacking my king. I'll block it. Very good idea. Very good idea. And it also prepares the pawn to advance to f7 because it cannot be taken. So it's a very good idea. So am I worried? A little bit. I'll have to confess. I'm a little bit worried. Not much. Because I need to get this knight in. I'm going to do it. I'm going to move the pawn again. Get the pawn out of the way. The pawn's clogging up the works. They got this knight back in the game. Now this knight is starting to come to d4. And all of a sudden, two knights in a rook starts to add up to real attacking power. So now, after I play d3, what are you going to do? Well, you can't just let him take or advance. You got to take, right? So, but that's a move that white didn't do anything to improve his position, but I got to improve mine because my knight comes in. First off, I throw in a check, ask the king, where do you want to go? Always a good question, because if you set a problem for your opponent has to solve the problem. And if you keep setting problems, one of these days, one of these moves, your opponent is not going to solve the problem. This is nothing scientific about this. It's just the way it works in practice. Keep setting problems for your opponent to solve. So king to g1, got to get out of the way. Got to get out of the way. Knight comes in. Guess what? The knight's attacking the queen. Queen's got to move. So all black's pieces are moving forward against the king and queen. And the king and queen are just moving around, not improving their positions at all. And so what are you going to do? Well, all right. I got another safe square here. I can move the queen to f2. Okay. All right. So what are we doing here? The two knights and rook are not enough to close the deal. So what about getting my queen in? Yes, that's the answer. That's the answer. Get the queen in the game. But doesn't that allow the f7 advance? Yes, it does. Should I be terribly worried about that? Not if I can block it. It can't queen if I'm in front of it. So sometimes don't be scared of threats. Evaluate them and see if they're real. Pawn on f7 can look scary, but if it cannot go to f8, it may not be scary. So this is just the off-the-cuff advice. Don't be afraid. Banish your fear when you play chess. You cannot play chess well if you're going to let fear get in the way. So now he says, okay, I'm in the tough. This rook is doing nothing. Let's get him in the game. Rook to h3. All right, so now he's threatening to take my knight. I don't want that. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Well, maybe I should just attack his queen again. Looks pretty good to me. Now I've got my queen, 2 knights, and a rook into an attack. And his pieces are kind of on the side of the board, not really helping too much. This rook is no help at all. And the queen, the main defender of the king, is not a good defender. The queen loves to attack. The queen does not like to play defense. So if you attack the queen, she usually has to move. So not the best defender. Knights are good defenders. Knights will stay there and you want to take me, take me. Queen can't say that. So the queen's got to move. What are you going to do? Oops. Did I play that wrong? Knight g4.
We have 31 rook h3 followed by 31 knight g4.
Okay. What did I do wrong here, though? I've got something messed up because I say queen to b2. Oh, queen to b2. Oh. Queen to b2 makes sense. So now I've got a little tiny problem here because then he could play his rook here or his bishop here and start to throw a little problem at me on b7. So I solved this in a rather odd way because I play a5. Now a5 is a strange move, but it creates Luft, so the king is not worried about being checked on the back rank and checkmated. So Luft is the German word that we say for an escape valve, and it allows air for the king to have some air to escape. Now, after a5, he does play what I thought he would play, which is to start to threaten checkmate. You can see the bishop and the queen are a battery against b7, and if I do nothing, he'll take it and checkmate me. So, yeah, obviously you don't want to do nothing. So what's the thing to do in cases like this? You just take it. Take the piece that's causing you the headache. Even though it's worth 5 and I'm only getting 3 in return, that piece was causing me trouble. Get out of trouble. And why would I do that? Why would I make such a mistake? Give up so much material for so little in return? Well, do you notice what's one of the things you look for in chess? Look anytime that the queen and king are lined up on the same diagonal, or the king and the rook are lined up on the same file or rank. You look when you can have a discovered attack. This piece can move, and it's a free move because you are going to be delivering check. The queen delivers check on the king. It's a free move for the knight. The knight gets to go anywhere it wants. So the king has to go away. Run away, poor king. Can't go to h2. The knight's there. Kind of out of choices. If you go to f1, queen to f2 is checkmate. So h1 is forced. Then I get my exchange sacrifice back right away. Now I am fine as far as material is concerned. But I still have a queen and knight attacking the king. So this still looks pretty good to me. So he takes. And I take this pawn, which has been the thorn in my side, the bone in my throat all game long. And notice he does have queen check here, but the king is Luft. The king can get out of check. So this is the point behind a5. Now, is this magical thinking? No, this is just calculations. And you know that you just, general principle is give your king an escape square. Don't let it get checkmated on the back rank. So I can take that pawn with perfect confidence. I'm not going to get checkmated. Not a problem. So now, black's king is trapped in the corner. I'm threatening maybe knight takes or knight to f2, maybe not. But it's getting kind of awkward. It's getting kind of tough. So any suggestions out there for what white should play? Hearing none. He plays queen d1. Now, I'm not going to criticize the move because it does attack the knight. And it does put the queen more in the center, a little bit more. It was pretty much in the center anyways, so maybe not. But it's not a bad move. it does attack the knight, which is, I'm running out of pieces now. If I want to seal the deal, how am I going to do that? So queen d1, well, I'll take a pawn. Now I have a material in force, advantage in force. 4 pawns to 3. And these 3 pawns are separated and isolated from one another, subject to attack, hard to defend. Pieces don't want to defend pawns. So it's already making white's position passive. It was passive to begin with. And now there's another nasty little threat here, because the queen is doing an X-ray on the queen. So if the knight moves with check, the queen could just take it. So this is starting to be a real problem. So he gets the queen out of the way with check. King moves, utilizing the lift that the a5 move gave. All right, so now queen d8 check, king a7. So he's checking me around. And is this a big deal? No, because the king is perfectly safe. How are you going to attack the king now? You've got all your pieces over here. The few that remain are way over here. The king is in no danger, perfectly safe. So what is the king going to do? Well, maybe the king should run away. How is he going to run away, though? The rook is cutting off the f-file. So I don't know about that move, but I don't know. Rook f1 was a definite threat. Let's face that. You know, that would be checkmate, rook f1. So it does take away the checkmate. So you can't really criticize it. Now I play queen to b5, which reinvigorates the mate on f1. So this is getting to be kind of ugly. So he plays rook to d3 to block the mate. Makes sense. But what if I just attack it? Where is it going to go? So now it's getting real nasty. Okay, you can still block the mate on f1 by playing rook d1. But, you know, the knight also now protects that rook. So now I'm hitting the queen and the rook. So you can play this, hang on, but after this move, he resigned. And it's a perfectly good time to resign. You know, there are threats here that white is going to take advantage of by threatening both this pawn and that pawn, and then it'll be 4 to 2. And so the end game is lost in any case. And so the more material that comes off, the easier it is for black to win. So that was one of my favorite games of all time. It helped our team win. We did defeat the team of East Germany in that match so many years ago. And between thinking about the geometry of the chessboard and the idea of using the principles of the game, the principles of space, get more space on your opponent if you can, development, the element of time, get your pieces out faster than your opponent can. The element of king safety is paramount, and also material, the element of force in chess. If you have more pieces, you're going to win more often. So if you can take more material than your opponent can take, you'll have an advantage. Now, all of these principles, this is what you have to do. You're the chemist now, and you have to assemble these chemicals into one vial, and you have to stir it around so it makes a good game of chess. But all of these elements alone will not win you a chess game. It's how you put them together that makes you a chess master. And that's the advice I have for you today. That's the time I have for you, and it has been my pleasure. I'm James Eade. You can call me Jim.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Chris Torres with some help from my friends. As always, there is a link to a quiz on this video contained in the description. Also, be sure to check out the Daily Chess Musings Club on chess.com, the Daily Chess Musings Facebook page. Follow me on Twitter at TorresChess, and peruse through thousands of free chess lessons on dailychessmusings.com. But before you go, please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons.